woman whose sanity was in greater doubt than Annie's. The old crone was an outcast. She'd been forced from her home by her former laird to make way for more profitable tenants, namely sheep. Several years passed, in a fleeting mood of generosity. Glencanadoo's laird, Gilbert MacDonald, had welcomed such cast-offs as Mrs. McBean. The foolish popinjay could scarcely pay his own mortgage, and had long ago sold most of his lands to settle debts. But the laird of Glencanadoo fancied himself quite the paragon of Highland courtesy, so he'd invited Mrs. McBean to live at the edge of the village, in a cottage no one else wanted. A cast-off woman in a cast-off house, doling out herbs and midwifery to villagers who called her a witch. That woman was Finley's last hope, the only hope. Annie's stepfather and two of her stepbrothers had helped repair Mrs. McBean's roof, rebuilt the hearth, and reattached the door. In return, Mrs. McBean routinely made liniment for Annie's stepfather's aching joints, and carved ugly trinkets she swore would bring Annie's stepbrothers wives to please your very soul. Mrs. McBean owed a debt to Annie's family, and the Macpherson men tolerated her gestures. Annie was not a Macpherson. The woman owed her nothing, and yet she'd been kind. She'd seen Finlay, acknowledged Finlay, when no one else did. Feeling the laddie's cool dark hair slide through her fingertips, Annie sighed and leaned against the open door, trying to stifle the fear that clutched with a cold, relentless grip. At midday, the sky was like iron. Drizzle had started up again. Had it ever stopped? She gathered her plaid tighter around her, folding her arms across her chest and watching mud deepen along the lane. "Have you enough bread to see you till Wednesday, Mrs. McBean?" she asked over her shoulder, eyeing the basket of loaves she'd brought. "Oh, aye," came the vague reply. "I'm obliged to you, dear." The chair near the fireplace creaked its familiar groan as the old woman sat. "The brown book with the acorn on the spine might say something about spiritual afflictions. Now, where did I bury that one?" Annie caught Finley's gaze and crossed her eyes. He glanced toward the muttering Miss McBean and smothered a laugh. "We'll return in a few days, then," Annie said, plucking her hat from the hook. The old woman scratched her head, then her leg, then her elbow. She stood and searched beneath her cracked wooden chair. Annie raised a brow at Finlay, who shot her a crooked grin. She was pleased to see it. He'd been so unwell of late she'd begun to despair of ever seeing that Finn grin again. Perhaps this would be one of his better days. As she left the cottage, he remained tethered to her side. She tugged her hat lower, cursing the sullen rain and the wilting brim. She'd inherited the worthless thing from her stepbrother, Broderick, who'd inherited it from her eldest stepbrother, Campbell. Blasted Macphersons had heads the size of washtubs. Huffing, as she resettled the hat on the back of her head, she added 4 strapping stepbrothers to her silent cursing and tromped through deepening mud. Down the lane that ran from the foothills along the loch toward the village, 2 MacDonald women lingered outside a tidy cottage. The younger Mrs. MacDonald resettled a bairn on her broad hip and grumbled to her mother-in-law. "Cousin Dougal says work at the kelp beds has dried up. Next I expect he'll be blethering about Canada again. That wife of his, no doubt, Glaswegian tart." The bairn fidgeted until his mother pinched his leg. He whimpered but stopped squirming. Grizzle MacDonald was Annie's age, 24, and already had 4 wee ones. Annie pitied those children. Grizzle had a spiteful temper. 2 of Annie's scars had come from her teeth. They'd been lassies no bigger than Finlay when the injuries occurred, but still spiteful. The elder Mrs. MacDonald glanced up at the rain. "Warned him, I did. Not remains in the coastlands, but seabirds. Canada might offer better prospects." Grizzle's full lips twisted. "My fool husband says the same. Mayhap we should all board a ship then." Her gaze snagged upon Annie. "Christ's blood!" she hissed, shifting her bairn to the opposite hip and backing toward the garden gate. "'Tis mad Annie. She's been to see the McBean witch again." Her mother-in-law spun with a darting, weary stare in Annie's direction. "Best get inside," the older woman muttered.